And joining me now is Eliza. She's a congressional reporter for USA Today. Eliza, welcome. Republicans have been touting the strong economy. Is this the messaging they've been hoping for heading into midterms, and can they stick with it?
This is absolutely good news for Republicans and the White House. They have to be feeling really good this morning. Republicans here at the Capitol have had a really hard time messaging their tax cuts back home. They feel like it's a winning message, but it just has not hit consumers. They might be seeing a little more in their paycheck, but the numbers have kind of stalled out in polling. And so hopefully they're hoping that today's announcement, they can go and say, look, it really is working. This is a strong economy. You've seen the stock market higher than ever, but now the economy, the GDP is higher. It sort of like gives them more hard numbers to back it up. You can bet that they're going to be using that on the trail.
Is there the risk, though, that some of this is just everybody rushing to do business ahead of the tariffs, and that once that hits, it'll all slow down?
There's absolutely that risk. And Republicans are really worried about the tariffs. That's one thing that I have seen Republicans push back on the president on consistently. Republicans have a really hard time pushing back on the president, but they have been concerned about trade and tariffs. And I've had a lot of sources tell me that they're nervous that this is going to hit right before the election. Right now, people are rushing to do business. It hasn't quite hit the farmers, but they're worried that that's going to happen. And so there's absolutely that risk that next quarter, those numbers will not be as high.
Right. And Eliza, as you point out, this is coming as many House Republicans are heading home for recess amid these fears over a trade war. And farmers are worried. Many this week were raising alarms. So do today's economic numbers really help ease some of their concerns?
I think in the short term, they help ease their concerns. They certainly help when they get back home this weekend and next week and they're talking to voters. They have something that they can point to. But in the back of their minds, especially in some of these states and districts where there are farmers, where there is that threat, it can't be a long-term strategy. They are trying to convince the White House to step back on these tariffs. Obviously, the president has doubled down this week. I think he tweeted that tariffs were the greatest. That's causing Republicans to be concerned here, even with these good economy numbers.
And Eliza, how are Democrats reacting to this message that the economy is doing well? Is it forcing them to change their messaging a little bit?
I don't think Democrats will change their message because the economy has been doing well. This is just kind of an official announcement with numbers. But the economy has been doing well, and Democrats concede that that is one thing that the president and Republicans have kept consistent. Their messaging is about health care. It's about the president and his bombastic remarks. It's about the Russia investigation. It does sort of give them a little bit of pause if they're trying to message on the economy and jobs. But really, Democrats seem to be messaging on health care and the message that Republicans voted to take it away last summer when they voted on the repeal. And even though that didn't go through, Democrats feel like that is their messaging that will get them to the majority, at least in the House, in November.
Now, meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin today says he is ready to come to Washington, and he even invited President Trump to Moscow. Now, some U.S. lawmakers slam the idea of Putin coming to Washington. Would they be more open to Trump going to Russia?
I think that lawmakers, and I would imagine in both parties, want some promises if the president is going to go to Russia. I think there's the real sense that going to Russia is on Putin's turf. They have a lot of concerns, members of both parties, about what happened last week with that press conference where the president seemed to side with Putin over his own intelligence community. The president has walked that back. But lawmakers here are very concerned about the U.S. relationship with Russia, especially with this president who has taken a sort of an unconventional approach with Putin. And I think there's a sense that if he goes to Russia and sits down with Putin, presumably behind closed doors again, they just don't know what's going to happen. And it gives Putin power.
And Eliza, this all comes as Missouri Senator Claire McCaskill confirms a report that Russians attempted to hack her Senate computer network. What more can you tell us about that?
So basically, the Russians, they meddled in the 2016 election. The intelligence community has said that. Now it's basically showing that they're still doing it. It kind of undermines the president's argument that, well, his argument has been a little bit back and forth on this, but Russia didn't meddle, and then Russia did. And this week he said, well, Russia is going to meddle, but it'll be on behalf of the Democrats because they don't want Republicans in power. That undermines his argument. Claire McCaskill is facing a really tough race. She's one of those, we call them red state Democrats. It's a state Trump won. And so this, trying to undermine her campaign, certainly looks like Putin and the Russians are helping the president and the Republican Party. And that makes it more difficult for Republicans to argue that that's not the case.
Eliza Collins in Washington, thank you.
Thanks.